Hi, welcome to Tech Leader TV. I'm your host, John Thomas Flynn, and this fall marks the beginning of our 9th season of TLTV, and we continue with a stellar lineup of topics and guests, the show that everyone's talking about, a live streaming video webcast and cable television program focusing on public sector information technology and the political landscape. We come to you today courtesy of our sponsors, Information Builders, Unisys, LexisNexis, Xerox, Optum, Nexus, a Dimension Data Company, Veeam, Comcast, Microsoft, Tanium Kronos, and Absolute Software. And finally, Flynn and Associates, California Certified Small Business Enterprise and Trusted Advisor for Strategic IT Business Development, Marketing, and Solution Services. And thanks for watching. The Tech Leader TV website continues to set new audience records. We're reaching thousands of state IT decision makers and vendor partners who recorded 250,000, a quarter of a million page views last month alone. Well on our way to over 2 million views in 2015. And we have a very special program today with our guest, CalPERS CIO Liana Bailey-Crimmins. It's been almost 4 years since Dale Jablonski, the then CIO at CalPERS, graced our stage, though I guess I'm not sure if Dale would exactly agree with that terminology. Anyway, we have a lot to cover with Liana, and just to provide some perspective, CalPERS manages pension and health benefits for more than 1.6 million California public employees, retirees, and their families. And it's the largest public pension fund in the United States with assets over $300 billion. Before we get started, I'd like to, and I introduce Liana, just a few observations, if I may. Our last show with State Auditor Elaine Howe elicited some of the most viewer comments we've ever seen on our website. And that's not surprising, as Elaine called out the governor for downgrading the CIO's office and elaborated on her audit findings of stunning cybersecurity non-compliance among state departments. On that latter point, ironically, this week the state held its 15th annual security fair, and sitting on the governor's desk is AB 670, which calls for a Department of Technology to hire a dozen new staff to conduct independent security assessments of state agencies. Frankly, this legislation appeared dead last month, but the auditor's report, and we like to think, the hectoring from Tech Leader TV has forced the administration to take a second look. Seems a small price to pay to avoid the kind of security breaches on the state's critical infrastructure that could cause up to $1 billion of economic losses to California each day until services are restored. Each day, $1 billion in losses. Let's keep our collective fingers crossed on this and hope the governor does the right thing and signs AB 670. And before I forget, there were also significant developments in September regarding the state's controversial cloud strategy. Exciting stuff, huh? But let's save some of that for our discussion with our guest. As usual on Tech Leader TV, we're going to continue to do our best to keep the spotlight on the state's management of its annual multi-billion-dollar IT investment to make government more effective and more efficient and secure. And hopefully we'll have a little fun and keep your interest at the same time. Our motto is simple, as I like to say, California can always do better. Let's begin the journey now with our discussion of technology, government, politics, and as I like to say, other unnatural acts. I'll be right back with our guest in just a moment, and we'll begin. Hi, welcome back to Tech Leader TV. As I said, our guest today is Liana Bailey-Crimmins, the Chief Information Officer at CalPERS. And she's been there since her appointment in 2013 at the Information Technology Services Branch, providing IT executive direction and oversight, supervising management of MyCalPERS and other CalPERS technology systems. Liana has over a quarter century of public sector technology experience and previously served as the California Correctional Healthcare Services, the Receiver's Office. Earlier this year, Liana was honored by getting the award, the prestigious Chief Information Officer of the Year Award at the California CIO Academy. Liana, welcome to Tech Leader TV.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm not sure if you're the first CIO of the Year awardee on the show, but anyway, we're going to celebrate it as such. Interesting about CalPERS, we've had constitutional officers, we had the auditor on, obviously we've had folks from the executive departments, but CalPERS is a different animal. Tell us a little bit about the organization from the standpoint of how it's set up in government.
Sure. So what's unique about CalPERS is we have an independent board of 13 members. We have a board president, and we have the treasurer and the controller as part of the members. And we are independent, so our budget is not subject to legislative approval. And that board works independently to make sure that the retirement fund has a future on behalf of our members.
Mm-hmm. So when you say it's totally independent, is it similar to a constitutional office where you don't have the restrictions and the requirements, and you're exempt from some of the CalNet 3, some of the other procurement?
We are deemed an exempt entity, but we are actually under the GovOps agency.
Okay.
So we are deemed a state department, and we report to the agency like other departments.
Okay, that's interesting. So our good friend Andrew Armani,
Yes.
right, is the agency CIO over
Yep.
there. Okay, great. Well, we'd like to get to know you a little better. So describe your background in government and how you got to be where you are in 2013, your appointment. Tell us about
Sure.
that.
Well, I've worked for the state, and I've been a public servant for my entire career, 27 years. And I'll tell you, 27 years goes by in a blink of an eye. I would have never thought about that. Worked for 7 different departments, very large and small. And I've just been able to work with some amazing individuals over my career. And as such, I've worked in, my current shop is 650 staff. And I just enjoy working with people, and I feel that at the end of the day, the technology is a service we deliver, but our success is because of people and the relationships, and that is the relationships we establish with our staff, the relationships we establish with our business stakeholders, and at the end of the day, our vendor partnerships as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, 650, so what's your budget? What's the IT budget?
We have a
over there?
$100 million budget. Obviously, as you can imagine, with 650 staff, huge from a personnel perspective. We have discretionary and non-discretionary funds. And at the end of the day, we're always looking to improve and be innovative with our services on behalf of the members.
Are you funded through CalPERS itself? You don't get general fund support?
Primarily is self-funded, but our health program actually does go through a BCPA FSR process, and there are some general funds related to our health program.
And so if you want to do, for example, an IT project, you go through the same course as agencies have in the past with the FSR, et cetera, et cetera?
For the health programs.
Okay, just for the health programs?
Correct.
So if you wanted to do any other kind of, like my CalPERS, the IT project, that didn't have to go through the same type of FSR process that
Well, what we
others
do
did?
is because we're independent, the board approves our budget and the board approves our projects.
Okay.
So we have a fairly rigorous governance process. So even though we don't go through the technology agency, there's 3 levels of governance. One is at a program level, the other is at a senior leadership level that looks at across the enterprise, and the other is an executive body perspective.
Okay. Now, did your, do you call it a department or an agency? What do you call CalPERS?
A department.
Okay. Do you sometimes, does the legislature sometimes require that, let's say, the state CIO get involved in oversight on some projects, or is you strictly independent in that respect? You know, for example, like the CIO, the legislature said they had to oversee the courts project that got in trouble a few years ago. Does that happen at all with your department, or are you really independent?
We are independent. We're not subject to technology agency approval, but because I've worked in many departments, I share lessons learned, I participate, and really try to stay ahead on the pulse of what's going on with the state. At the end of the day, though, it is our executive body and the board that approve and oversee our projects.
Okay, interesting. So you realize that's even more independence than a constitutional officer when you get right down to it. Very interesting. Tell us about your organization again. There's senior staff. I know we've got your strategic plan. We saw a lot of photographs of some folks, but how are you organized in your department?
Sure. The IT department specifically. So I have 650 staff. I have 7 direct reports. And what we look at is over the last 2 years, we've been on a road for transformation. And that road of transformation was started by our IT strategic plan. So we had not had a strategic plan for many years. And so one of the things I was trying to focus on is allowing the people to have a voice in the strategic plan. Typically, state leaders, specifically CIOs, go in a room with their staff and develop a strategic plan. I didn't want it to be the CIO plan. I wanted it to be a plan that represented the people. So out of 650 staff, I had 57 volunteers that wanted to have a voice in their future, and we had 11 business representatives to make sure what we were developing aligned to the overall business strategy. And in addition to the plan, I didn't want it to just be something that was shelfware, so we created a video. And so staff, when we talked about being innovative or a strategic partner, they were able to to provide their non-scripted voice of what that meant to them. And they've really just embraced the strategy, which to me I think is how we end up being successful as leaders.
Well, that's very interesting. I know that you, I think you provided the update on your strategic plan. Is that just came out, as I understand? Is that correct?
Actually, you're a great researcher. We're actually launching it in a week, the new strategic plan for IT. So what we have is a strategic plan that has goals that are for 3 years. So we're just on our second year of that, so goals and objectives. But because of the budget cycle, as you can imagine, we do annual initiatives. So we're launching the this coming year. Yes.
Is this it?
That is it. Fresh off
this
the press.
This is the scoop, huh?
This is the scoop.
That's what this show's all about. You can't afford not to watch this show. This kind of information.
Yep.
It's very interesting. I went through it several times. Some of these, I tried to get a copy of the photograph of everybody jumping up.
They're excited about the progress.
Yes. These are probably the 57 people, right?
Yes.
What are they smoking over there at CalPERS anyway?
No, they're happy to be. And what's unique about CalPERS also is, remember, we're members also. We're members also. And so every decision that we make.
I think I am too.
Fantastic. So every decision we make, we're personally vested. So we're always kind of keeping an eye on what we're doing and how that benefits the members, because at the end of the day, it affects our families as well.
I know that one of the things that we find very interesting and very challenging is the whole idea of getting aligning with business. Every talk, before there was the big security issues being number one, it was always trying to align IT with business, and it's always a challenge. You said you had, I think you said you had 11 program people involved in your strategic planning. How did you find them? How did you select them? How did they get involved? And what's the secret to getting productivity and help and sincerity out of the program people that so often don't really care?
Well, I say the secret is relationship. So it starts there. As we both know, Gartner research states that 46% of all IT projects fail. And that's a little better than flipping a coin, but not by much. And believe it or not, a lot of projects fail because we have different languages with business. So IT, we have the language of Active Directory, load balancing, and when we talk to business, it's about operational efficiencies, governance, and when you add the vendors in there, there's a whole nother language.
Sure.
And so it's about respecting and being each other's translators and having really progressive partnerships, because only together can we truly succeed.
Yeah.
And I think if you come from the heart and you understand that as an IT organization, you're there to serve business, and they have the vision, but you have the tools and the know-how, that's where they want to be a part of it. And as you can see from our strategic plan, it's not about technology, it's about being innovative, it's about delivering value, it's about being a strategic partner. And so when we sit down with business, we wanted to hear from them, what did that mean when it came to technology? When we talk about being a strategic partner, what would they like to see? And so we were able to incorporate that into our goals and our initiatives.
I seem to recall in reading the older the original strategic plan, where I think there were maybe 20, 25 initiatives or projects that came out of it last year, and I think there's 19 or 20 in the new one. What are some of the current big projects that you're working on right now? And we'll talk about future ones in a little bit.
So remember, the projects that I'm currently working on were already approved through the board last year. So I currently have 20 projects and initiatives. One of the ones that's important, or actually there's quite a few, but a few that I'll talk about is our disaster recovery, business recovery. So we're at the end of our agreement with our current vendor.
Who's that?
That is EMC and SunGard. So we have the ability to recover at New Jersey if we're ever in a disaster. And so we will be putting that out to bid, which will be available for individuals to participate in. We're looking for more of a cloud-based solution. Currently, the agreement is 7 years old, so it's bare metal. So if we ever declare a disaster, it's build it from the ground up. And as you know, the technology changes. So we're looking for disaster recovery, backup recovery, and high availability. And then the other...
when do you think that procurement will come out?
Hopefully in the next 2 weeks.
Next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
There you go again.
Another scoop.
Well, another scoop.
Keep
I'm
an
telling
eye
you.
out
Keep them
there.
coming.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. That's what these people are here for.
That's great. And then the other one's functional optimization. So when I joined CalPERS, it was 3 years post go live. And so as you are aware, customers' needs evolve and technology advances. So what we've adopted is an optimized framework and a mindset. And so what we're looking at is providing more self-service for our members, increase security, and looking for opportunities to simplify our architecture so the state can truly support this long term, and continue to look for those opportunities to invest. And then the last legacy system we have is for the actuarial office. It's written in Fortran. So that is another opportunity. We are going to be replacing that system, and I will tell you.
I know Fortran.
Good. So do I. But I'll tell you, the new project will not be in Fortran. So what we're going to be doing is replacing that legacy system and then enhancing it.
When do you think that procurement will occur?
Actually, there'll be multiple procurements. We're looking for solution architects, individuals. It's interesting because
over the next couple months, or
yeah,
okay.
If not sooner.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. You know, back to that executive sponsorship, if you will, and you're very, I've always said the most critical ingredient for a successful project is executive sponsorship. In so many cases, if you don't have that, and I was really pleased that you know, you've got a real, you brought your posse with you, but you also brought one of your executive officers, I believe, Doug Hoffner.
I did.
That's impressive. Now, roll up? Do you report up? Is that how it is?
Yep, I report to Doug. He's one of the smartest men that I know.
Okay.
And then he reports to Ann, and then Ann reports to the board.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's very good.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, if you can get that kind of executive sponsorship and executive leadership to care about what you're doing, it makes your job a lot easier. Particularly when it comes to getting things. You know, you can be collaborative to get things done, but sometimes you have to put your big CIO hat on to get things done. If you have an executive leader that's really involved, that makes that job so much easier, which is, and as we know throughout government, it's certainly not always the case that you have that kind of executive coordinator, if you will, and facilitator to make our jobs, which are very difficult when we're our CIOs. What are you talk a lot about the culture. How do you describe the culture over there? I know there's plenty of interesting photographs and such, but how do you build that? You have some very interesting organizations, and I think you even have a space. I read something in your strategic plan. You actually have a space
For innovation.
Is that like a room or romper room?
Yeah, we're actually multiple ones, kind of like the Google model.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you, with all the individuals that report to me, they're a lot smarter collectively than I am. And it's important to provide them opportunities and forums to break the mold and think outside the box. And what I love about CalPERS is the core values. When you talk about honesty, integrity, openness, they're not words on a wall. It starts from the board, it goes down through the executive body and the staff, and we embody it, and it's a part of the culture. We work hard, we play hard, and it's about team, and we are all on the road to success.
And what are some of the things, though, specifically that you do have a space? How do you use that space? What are some of the other things you do to invigorate and reinvigorate the culture? Because it's a dynamic thing and a dynamic challenge, if you will.
Well, one of the things that we are big on is informal mentoring. So one of the ideas that we were thinking about is we put it on a whiteboard of how we could do more in relation to mentoring the next generation. As many of you know, the silver tsunami is coming, and as such, how do we attract the millennials? How do we put together good succession planning, and how do people feel a part of their future? One of the things I find at CalPERS is we see individuals beyond their classifications. In fact, we have actually created a database, a personal professional networking site called Illuminate. And Illuminate means to illuminate, to shine light on.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Illuminati, which I think is a cult back in the
No, John, it's not.
1700s.
No, it's not a cult. It means illuminate, to enlighten, and
enlightenment,
to share.
That's what it
enlightenment.
comes from.
And it's about seeing people beyond their titles so they can share their current skills, their desired skills of what they want to learn. It also allows us to match up. So if you want to learn something, and an individual wants to mentor, it expands your network beyond the individuals you know. And
is
so
this like an in-house Facebook, or
it
how
is.
would you?
Or LinkedIn, but we've kind of taken it to multiple steps further. We've kind of modified it the CalPERS way, and we are meeting with CalHR. The union actually represented it or presented it in their newsletter, so they're excited about it. And we are going to be offering it to other departments.
But it's up and you're utilizing it now.
Yes.
Very interesting.
We are going to be rolling it out. Right now it's just in the IT organization. We're rolling it out to the rest of the divisions this year.
And that's there are a number of social network type of initiatives you have there. What are some of the others?
Well, we're big when it comes to Facebook, Twitter. Social media is extremely important to get the message out. We are also looking at mobile apps. Because again, one of the things that we find is we want to want to bring in the new generation. So we've created mobile apps. So when you go to a college or a job fair, college students can't quite translate what they do today in school to how does that translate to a state classification.
Okay.
So we've actually created an app that we have iPads. We have HR helping them, and they can actually take the exam, and an individual's there to help them to get on the Programmer 1 and 2 series. And we're looking at expanding that. So, you know, the last thing we want to do is attract a millennial and then hand them pen and paper and say, okay, this is the technology of the state today, which we know that that's not true.
And you're working directly with some of the schools around California?
Yeah, the community colleges. We have a whole outreach program. We also have career fairs. We've had those in the past where we want individuals to know more about CalPERS. We are deemed a destination employer, and I think the reason that is because we do truly care about the people, if it be investing in our workforce or if it be the members. And we were always looking for innovative ways to deliver great technology to them so they can see how to change their health benefits, how that affects them and their family, and how they should, you know, how they should select their pension plans in the future.
Excuse me. I guess if you were looking at CalPERS in its functionality and all the different operational aspects of it, you know, obviously you're collecting the contributions from all your members, and you're paying out contributions to retirees and disability folks, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a huge aspect of this is the investment side. And it's a whole different animal when it comes to understanding technology. What kind of technology initiatives are involved in the investment side? Do you get involved in that side of the business as well?
Well, we do get involved.
IT, I mean.
We get involved, but primarily it's ran through the investment office because they use State Street, BlackRock, really the Wall Streets of the world technology. And so we work with those individual vendors to make sure that when and if something happens, that we can continue to trade on behalf of our investments. And so that's how we get involved, is more from an ancillary perspective.
You told us about some of your current initiatives, and you actually told us about some of the ones that were coming up. There any more? You said there were I think there were 19 or so. Tell us some of the other larger projects, I should say, that are coming up in the next year.
Well, we're just now starting to talk about 16, 17. That will be then discussed at the board meeting in March. That's when we read in our budget. So we have a lot of great ideas floating around. Some of them you have seen in our strategic plan. The other are...
well, and just interrupt for a second, because I keep going back thinking, oh, it's going to show up in the governor's budget, but it's not. No. It's going to be in your budget. So what document do you go to if you want to learn where your projects are at CalPERS?
So there's several ways to stay in touch with what CalPERS is doing. One is read our strategic plan. That's available on the website. We have a business plan. And also watch board meetings. You will learn a lot about what CalPERS is about and what's important to us by attending the board meetings. They're the third week of every month. They're broadcast via the web, and they're also archived. So if someone is on vacation and they miss it, they can always go back and read it or listen to it at another time.
Okay, and so back again, any more, you're working on new projects, you say, for 16, 17. What are some of those other ones you haven't mentioned yet?
So one of the things we're looking at is we're implementing Office 365. We are making sure, email has become mission critical, so we want to make sure that that is available. So we're looking at that.
What do you use for email now? Do you use one of the state's email systems?
We had an in-house solution.
Okay.
So we are moving to the cloud. So over the last 6 months, we've moved to additional cloud-based solutions. And so another one was ServiceNow. We wanted to make sure that our incident management tool was the latest, and that is also in the cloud. And so we're just always looking for other solutions. Some of the ones that we might want to talk about is we look for opportunities for consultants to do knowledge transfer. So every single agreement that you will see that comes out of CalPERS, we have an intense focus on knowledge transfer, because at the end of the day, every solution has to be supportable by the state. And as such, we want to make sure that it's not just about a vendor coming in and delivering a run book or documentation. It's about sitting side by side with state staff and those staff learning on the job at that moment of what's going to be necessary and not waiting for the end of a project. So any new projects will have an intense knowledge transfer. We'll also be looking at cloud-based solutions. So, you know, as you see initiatives come through the strategic plan, we will be looking at those and see if they're a viable option. And again,
on that particular point of the cloud, again, you're not under the CalCloud recommendations or compliance. You don't have to worry about that. You do your own cloud thing.
Well, we always keep an eye on what's going on over there at Caltech, because it's extremely important. They are doing a lot of great things. They're reducing price, and they are providing more services based on their own cloud. So whenever we're looking at cloud solutions, we don't rule them out. We look at those as opportunities. If it fits the bill, we consider it. If not, we go out to bid and look for other opportunities.
Have you been onboarded on Cal Cloud?
No, I haven't.
So that's interesting. But you do have some current cloud applications, right?
Yeah, we have at least 70 currently, and as their need arises, we look at making sure that the vendor is secure, that we have the appropriate language to hold the vendor accountable.
Right.
Because if you have sensitive data, we want to make sure that there is an issue, that everyone's aware of what we need to do. So we've enhanced our contracts to have that language in it.
So do you have your own data center?
I have two.
Okay.
I have the primary data center that's actually located in the West Building, and we also have an emergency operations center in Rancho Cordova. Okay. It's one of the best emergency, other than Cal OES, I'd say it would be number 2 in the state departments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. You also had a data warehouse project, I think we talked about at what time. Tell us a little bit about that.
So
it's not a little project, it's probably a large project, I would assume.
Yeah, we have the technology in place, and what we're looking at is assessing, as you should always do, making sure that the focus is to build for today something that's going to be relevant into the future. So we always start thinking about, are the decisions that we're making related to technology going to be relevant 3, 5, 10 years. So the data warehouse, we're doing a technical assessment to make sure that it's scalable to where we want to take it in the future. And as you know, data drives decisions. And so what we use our data warehouse is to collect information, run predictive analytics, do reports, do data extracts, and be able to provide that vital information to business so they can make good decisions.
Right. And as I understand it, you actually have you're working on a potential, this study will eventually work its way into a procurement, an RFP, if you will, right?
Potentially. So what we're doing, the assessment part of it, and then based on the assessment, if there's any gaps, then potentially we will be looking at opportunities to mitigate those gaps with other vendor experts.
And that might happen when?
Probably in the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn to all of our favorite subject these days, and that's the cybersecurity. You're aware of the auditor's survey. I think I asked you this before, but just on the record, were you contacted by the auditor to complete the survey?
We were.
You were? And what was your decision, and why did you make it?
Sure. Excellent question. So one of the things we saw is when we read the questions.
Are you trying to hide something over there? I guess that's
No, John, never trying to hide. When we read the questions basically were how well CTA, the technology agency, was doing in relation to security. And because we're not subject to oversight, we really didn't find it fair to rate an individual on something that we were participating in.
Okay.
But what I'd have to say about the assessment and the audit that maybe people aren't aware of, it was actually a self-assessment.
Right.
So every department that participated actually rated themselves on how well they felt they were doing and how well they felt that CTA was doing. And I'd have to say that coming out of that, it tells me that the state of California takes security seriously, and they agree that we need to be doing independent assessments, understanding our gaps and mitigating those gaps. And CalPERS is already doing it.
That's kind of a different outcome than I would have read into that. I think about a third of the departments didn't respond, and 95% said they weren't compliant. So maybe they're taking it seriously, but obviously there's some gaps, serious gaps. And hopefully this new legislation that I spoke of in the opening will take care of that. You're aware? I think it's 670, AB 670, which would add a dozen or so new folks to Michelle Robinson's shop to do security assessments. And maybe this crisis that came out of the auditor's report will have some, it's an opportunity to fix some things that need fixing.
Well, it's an opportunity, and at CalPERS, we actually hire independent experts. That is one of the things that we do. There are things that you can perform self-assessments on, and there's others that you really need an expert to come in and truly understand and pull back. And the one thing I have to say about security is you have to, from a strategy perspective, you have to look at it beyond just the technology. You've got to look at it from people, process, and technology. Because only by evaluating all three of those can you truly understand where you need to mitigate. And so that's one of the things we look at is preventing, detecting, and responding. So we have a fairly robust security program at CalPERS.
there's always been an underlying issue in California about any kind of contracting out. In fact, there's various legislation and even constitutional restrictions on contracting out. From your organization, which is made up basically of the employees with a strong union influence, obviously, has that ever been an issue when you're trying to contract out, that there's objections raised? And how do you handle that when they do come up? Because they must come up.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of self-reflection on how many consultants we have, but we do have that robust knowledge transfer program that I was just telling you. We actually build it into all of our contracts to make sure at the end of the day, if a contractor is brought on, that knowledge is turned over to the state.
Okay.
So you have always new projects, but they have a beginning and end, and our job is to ensure that there's sustainability. Also, if you read our business plan, we have a specific business plan objective that talks about investing in our workforce and also reducing consultants. So it is important. It's something that's discussed at an executive level, and we have strategies to ensure that we don't become too reliant on the consultants.
Okay. Jumping back to security again, tell us about your security organization. Who was your CISO? I'm trying to recall. I think there's been some changes there?
No, Tom McCurry.
Tom McCurry.
Yep.
Okay.
So he's our CISO. And so as we're starting to provide quarterly updates to the board, and for us, security is and will remain a priority. And as you know, in June, the U.S. experienced the largest known attack on the federal network, and the breach of those computer systems may have compromised 20.5 million current and former.
You're looking at one of them. Chi-Com's got my background check.
That's a lot higher than the 4.5 million that they originally thought, and so it's something that's serious. We have to look at a strategy, and a true security strategy is like a chess game, and you have to be one, if not multiple, moves ahead of the bad guy. You have to have a strong security incident response plan. I'll tell you, John, when I joined the state service 27 years ago, and I know, like I said, it happened in a blink of an eye, you built the walls high, and you really never thought that the bad guy was going to get in.
Right.
But as you've seen, the industry's talked about, it's not a matter of if or when, and so it's about being prepared, if not within hours of minutes of responding, ensuring that vital data doesn't leave your network, and looking at from an employee security awareness perspective, ensuring that you are hiring the experts to do those independent assessments and being prepared to respond.
Now, are you subject, back again we go to this jurisdiction, are you subject to the legislation that requires reporting of breaches? Do you have to report breaches to the Attorney General's office like everybody else?
Yep.
Have you had breaches over at your shop?
Well, not that I'm aware of. We are doing assessments on a regular basis, but other than the typical virus.
Knock on wood, huh?
Yeah, typical virus.
But I'm sure you get the attacks astronomical, just like any big data center.
Well, what I tell you is that we have cyber warriors, and it involves business and technology. We have a security operations center, and they have the latest tools. And what we're always watching is not necessarily, we obviously make sure that our perimeter is protected and that we're secure, but we're also watching real time what's happening across the entire world. And based on that world, what's happening in the financial industry, is it something we need to be aware of? So we very much have a pulse on what's happening globally. We have relationships with the FBI. We have relationships with the CalOES and all the high-level individuals. And we also use industry experts like Mandiant and FireEye to help us as well. So.
You know, we've used this phrase before, and it's becoming somewhat mundane, but they say there's two types of organizations in the world: those who've been breached and those that don't know they've been breached. So it's such a challenge for you, and it's those, talk about career is over sometimes. It's a real big job, and it really you know, and nobody wants to get in front of a legislative committee and raise their hand and take an oath and have to testify about these things. So it is a challenge, and it's a 24/7, right?
It is, and one thing, John, as CIOs we've got to be aware of is focus on the functionality, because a lot of times these projects are building new functionality on behalf of our constituents. But we have to make sure that as we're doing that, we're securing that functionality along the way. So for us, you know, if you're a vendor, understand our security architecture, because we have fairly robust requirements, and so if we're bringing you in to provide a solution for us, I think it's important for them to understand that we have very strict requirements.
Okay. You know, believe it or not, we're almost running out of time here. There's a couple of items I want to go through, but let's talk about data transparency. You talked about the importance of data, and so often we say the data is locked up in jail, but what are you doing on that front?
Well, we took 109 legacy systems and combined them into one. And so what we're able to do now is do predictive analytics and be able to see the member from end to end versus going into those 109 different disparate systems. And as you talked about, there is a new Senate bill, I believe it is, that's going on to establish a kind of an open data portal. Well, I have to say, as a taxpayer, it did not.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Because as a taxpayer, I really...
See, this is now you're benefiting from this show as well.
Yes.
Back and forth. I like it. Yeah, it's too bad, but I think it's Senator Pan, as a matter of fact, from Sacramento, was a sponsor of that one, to create a chief data officer and be responsible for the open transparency across the enterprise, as they say. But it's going to happen, whether whether the governor fights it or the legislature fights it or not. It's going to happen sooner or later. It has to.
Well, data's powerful.
Yeah,
and imagine
exactly.
right now when we want
and valuable.
Yeah.
Not to mention.
Right. I mean, if you want to go understand DMV or as a specific taxpayer, you have to go to DMV. And if you go to from social services, can you imagine how powerful we could be from a state perspective if we had that data that's publicly available and that we can mine it and make good
What kind of
decisions.
technologies are you using now for your business analytics and predictive?
But you would normally SaaS, and we use the Oracle products as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because it certainly is it'll be very interesting to see you talk about cloud lines of business. It's a focus. It certainly is it's the technology du jour, I think, of just about everybody in state government.
Do you want
and
another
elsewhere.
scoop?
Keep them coming.
Okay.
Keep them coming. Pays the bills, as they say.
So one of the things we're also going to be doing is doing an RFI. So we are looking potentially at an opportunity, cost value, to see if the infrastructure from a data warehouse perspective, at the end of the day, we have to run the analytics because we understand the data. We are going to be doing an RFI that's going to be going out that will see if the community, the vendor community, has solutions to be able to provide that strong backbone and the tools necessary for a data warehouse.
Okay.
So
When's that going to happen?
That's hopefully in the next 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so keep an eye out for it.
Keep them coming. Keep
Okay.
them coming. In a few months we have left, you have a relatively unique procurement structure. You have your spring-fed pool. Talk about the status of that. Give me a 30 seconds response to that. I want to go through this list before I'm done.
Sure. So we have various pools. One's a spring-fed pool, which is for professional services, and we have about a $1.5 million cap. And then we have the vendor pool, which is where we buy the commodities. So we have hardware, software, and we also professional services that exceed the $1.5 million.
And how often are these open for new business?
So annually, we have a current. In fact, January is when the new award will go out. It's a 3-year agreement. I think 3 to 5. Don't quote me, but every year vendors can get added to that list. If you want to know how to do business with CalPERS, you just go onto our website, you click on About, and it specifically says how to do business with CalPERS.
Okay. Good site.
All right.
That's probably one of the things we want to talk about, because a lot of people want to know how do I do business with CalPERS if I'm an IT consultant? I think you had something called the secret sauce you'd like to talk about.
Sure.
Tell me about that. If I want to become a trusted IT vendor with the CalPERS, what do I do?
Well, go to the website first, become one of our valuable venders that we rely on. Also realize that there's only one CIO in an organization of 650 staff, and I rely on my staff heavily. So if you don't meet with me, be willing to meet with my other staff, because they're the ones that will provide me recommendations. So that's another tip. And then get to know us. Read our plans, attend board meetings, understand what is important to us as an organization, because I guarantee you, as you hear what's important to the board and to the executive body, a lot of times there's technology behind it. Okay. So, again, start to learn more about us, and then the other piece of it is, because I told you we actually we approve our projects 1 year ahead of time. When do you think the vendors start calling me? In July, right?
Yeah, right when the budget comes out.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the projects have already been approved. So if you're a vendor, come talk to me between January and March, because that's when we're talking about strategy. What should actually go into the plan.
Well, you're really asking for it here, you know?
And then March through about June timeframe, what we're looking at is analysis.
Sure.
And then after the projects have been approved, then in July, talk to us about implementation. So there's always discussions to be had, but there's different types of discussions.
Yeah. Any other advice?
Come
visit. Come visit.
Yeah, come visit.
You got a golf tournament or anything else like that?
No, we don't.
Hey, you mentioned my CalPERS. Your timing was exquisite. I think in 2013, all the terrible headlines were over about that big project. And in the last several years, I think most of the pundits and your board members are saying it ultimately was a success. What lessons that project went from like $250 million to over $500 million. Not unusual for some large state projects. What are the 2 or 3 biggest lessons you learned from that project? I'm sure you did some kind of I know there were a number of assessments that were explained and talked about in some of the articles I read, but were they done, and what was the bottom line? What were some of the really important lessons?
So, like any project, we did a post-independent evaluation report, but it was a peer plus. So not only did we look at the evaluation of how well the project did, we also looked at it from a plus perspective. Is actually, did the business value and the objectives that we thought we were going to get, did we achieve them? And that was reported back to the board. So that's another thing that's been recorded. So if you ever want to go out and look at what was actually presented. But what I have to tell you from
Is that peer available?
That what's presented to the board publicly, yes, that is available. And so there's lots of lessons learned, but what I have to say is don't do big bang. Make sure you're doing incremental wins. So what CalPERS currently does is we do agile builds every 7 weeks. So imagine being a customer and on a typical project having to wait years potentially to get functionality in. We don't do that anymore. We've also, many times, there's a fixed price agreement. And that sometimes fails because you do high-level requirements and then the vendor doesn't know a lot about you and you don't know a lot about them until the agreement.
I've never seen a real fixed price contract in the state of California in my 20 years here.
Well, there's usually ends up being a lot of amendments, correct?
Right.
So what CalPERS has done is we've done a hybrid. We do time and materials and fixed price. So based on what we've learned is that you do planning and design with the time and materials. So you're monitoring that fairly rigorously, and then you know exactly what you want and what the vendor needs to perform within a fixed price. And that is not just technology, that's also business. And then again, you know, the knowledge transfer, I can't hit that at home enough, because a lot of times projects will go off into a separate building or suite, and then they have to be integrated back in when the project's done. If you have a vendor that's a tester that's sitting in the test office training and doing blended teams, that tester is going to be much more likely to be successful when that vendor's gone.
By the way, do you collaborate with CalSTRS, the state teacher retirement system? Must be similar challenges, I would think.
Well, their CTO, Ashish Shane, actually used to work for me at the receiver's office. So yes, we're very good friends. And obviously our executives are very much in touch. And we do, you know, obviously CalSTRS is for the teachers, but there are school employees that are part of the PERS program. And so yeah, we're always collaborating.
Well, listen, believe it or not, we're running out of time. I want to thank you. I really appreciate you being here. I want to thank everybody that got a chance to watch the program today. Check out our website, comment. We always enjoy our comments, suggestions for topics and other speakers to join us. Special thanks, of course, to our guest today, Liana Bailey-Crimmins. We'll explore some of the more provocative and interesting issues at our reception afterwards. We've got some great shows coming up the next couple of months. We're planning on having Chris Cruz and Carlos before the end of the year, and 2016 should also be entertaining. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job. Isn't it amazing how